Alright, so that brings me to the other example, which is this tube. Now this one, we're going to use vertex paint as well as automatic weight. Alright, so there's one thing that you need to understand about automatic weight is that bones have a deform options. Now you can turn it on and off by going into the bone tab and checking it on and off. Now, to automatically bind an object to a armature, you simply select the object and then shift select any of the bones that you want to, and then press Ctrl P. And then from there, you'll be presented with this again. So if you parent directly to the object, that will parent it to the armature object and not the bones themselves. The armature deform will create automatically for you a armature modifier in the modifier stack, and will assign either empty groups, so vertex groups, or based on the envelope scale of the envelope bones, or automatic, which is roughly the same thing. And then bone obviously parented directly to the bone. Now for this case, I'm just going to quickly use automatic weight. Now if we select the actual tube and go to the object data property, we'll see that there's only a vertex group per arm. And the reason for that, it's because this one has the deform checked off as opposed to this one. Right? So if I undo a few times, so now both of these have deform on. So if I select this and shift select the actual any of the bone, it doesn't matter which one I select, and press Ctrl P and choose automatic weight. Now if I select the object, you will notice that it has two vertex group, and you will also notice if you bend it that it looks awful. All right. One reason is because when you're using automatic weight like that, it's creating the armature at the bottom of the stack. Now you would need to go and move it up like that. Again, not so bad, but it's still not that great. I'm going to come back to that example in a moment. I want to show the other type, so we're just going to undo a few times here. So now if we select the object and then shift select the actual armature, if you press Ctrl P again, we have with envelope weight. Now that takes in consideration the envelope type bones. All right, so it takes in consideration that envelope there. Now, if you would want that envelope to affect more, you simply need to select the little dot in edit mode and change the scale of the radius. So now let me go back to B bones here. If I put those back on. Now, if I go ahead and press Ctrl P and actually assign envelope weight, you'll see that it does also the same kind of thing here because it actually puts it at the bottom of the modifier stack. So again, you have to go ahead and bring that up. And now you've got a fairly decent deformation made in no time that you really don't have to edit much. All right, so it gives a little bit better result than the automatic weight itself. And the empty group, if I undo quite a few times again, now if I actually use the empty groups, all it does is it does the same thing. It puts it at the bottom of the modifier stack, and it creates two vertex group, but these vertex group are empty. There's nothing to it. So if I select the group and hit select, there's no vertices assigned to them. So you have to go and manually assign the vertices yourself, like this. And for this one, you'd go 0.5 on both bones, something like that. Tab out of there, and now you've got it rigged. So it really depends on your workflow if you prefer to assign them manually, if you prefer to use bone with envelopes, or if you're just fine with the automatic weight. I'm usually fine with the automatic weight, so I'm just going to undo a few times here to now show the vertex paint part of things. All right, so because we didn't vertex paint at all yet. All right, so you vertex paint when you need to tediously edit some weights. All right, so if I select this and then shift select this and press Ctrl P, we're going to use automatic weight. You'll also notice that it does a terrible job at it again. All right, and if you look here, you have to bring the armature up. Now, if we tab in edit mode, you'll notice that it's a very simple geometry that we have. And if you want to see it bend with the armature, you need to enable these two little checks on. So this one will affect the modifiers that are on it, and this one will affect the actual vertices that are on it. Clearly see the problem here is because that row of vertices is mostly affected by the top bone. All right. So to rectify that, we can simply press Alt and select that row. You could go in and simply add a weight of 1 to the actual arm, and that actually would take care of it. But if you would want more a soft type transition, it's best to actually go into weight paint mode. All right, so by going on top here, going to weight paint mode. Now for weight paint mode, if you want to see it clearly inside the viewport, it's best to go to the shaded mode. All right, so in shaded mode, you can actually clearly see what's going on. So red is a weight of 1, and blue is a weight of 0, green is 0.5, and then anything in between represent any increment from 1, 0.5 to 0. All right, so that's basically what that is. Now there's a few ways to soften the vertex group. So as you'll notice that you cycle through the vertex group directly here. Right. So how do you soften that up? Well, you simply can use the actual blur brush, zoom out a little and blur the heck out of this thing with both vertex group, and you should, in theory, eventually get a softer bend. Right? You can also, if you would want to have a sharper bend instead, use the brush on top. Go to the actual tool, all right, and then from there you have draw, you have mix, you have a bunch of things that you can use. You have subtract, multiply, mix, lighten, draw, darken, and add. I usually use the mix because you can specify the weight that you want to assign. So let's say I would want to have that entire midsection have a weight of 0.5. I simply enter it in here and go paint that weight of 0.5. Now you have to remember that we're painting on a subdivided mesh. So we're basically painting points that are not visible. All right, because they are subdivided. Right? As you can see, I've painted that green, which means that you're painting, if I put the actual wireframe on, right, we're painting these dots here, which are in reality more there. All right, so you have to keep that in mind when you're painting on subdivided mesh. So let's put that back on. Now, as you can see, it's easy to assign a specific weight, just like that. Now, it becomes tedious when there's a lot of polygons, but essentially this is the same thing, all right? So you can assign them manually as well. Now, if I would want more weights on the top part here, on the forearms, I simply select the forearm, go into the tool, put the weight of 1, and from there I can zoom out a little and paint weights of 1. Now you have to remember that these vertex are also affected somewhat by the arm bone. So if I go select the other vertices, you'll notice that there is weights here. So in order to have this be 1 only on the arm, or only on the forearm, I should say, I should remove these from the arm. And you do that by using the subtract brush. So if I go here and now I subtract, you'll notice that it sort of shifts a little bit. So you've got a little bit more weights. So you're basically redistributing the weight manually this way. So now this looks more like a arm bend, a little bit more. And then you could do the same thing for the bottom part. So you could say, well, I don't want the entire spectrum to be blurred out. I'd want some to be harsher, like the bottom vertices here. So you simply give them a weight of 1. Just like this, and then from there you have to make sure that you have to take away the blurriness that was added on the other one by using the subtract tool. All right, just like that. And now we've got a bending that is a little bit more like an arm. Now keep in mind, again, I'm painting on a subdivided mesh, and we got back the initial result that we had. So is vertex painting necessary? It depends on the subject highly. All right, that pretty much concludes the different ways of going about binding your mesh to your armature. All right, so this brings me to the last point that I want to talk about, which is the actual preserve volume as well as bend debones. So the preserve volume option in the armature panel is actually a means to try to go ahead and preserve the volume of the object even after it's bent. All right. So as you can see, in the case of having a very nice arm type like bending, this actually works a lot better with on, all right, with preserve volume on. Now, if you would want more like a tube bending, instead of using preserve volume, I would actually just use bendy bones, which is not usable for other types of engine or 3D application than Blender. So you couldn't export bendy bones to, let's say, Autodesk Maya, nor to engines like Unity or UE4. But in Blender, they are the holy grail of having awesome, nice tails and on creatures and characters, as well as tentacles and also tubes like this one. You'll notice that you'll get more of a tube bending using a few segments rather than using a lot of weight paint. So it's really about choosing the right one for the task at hand. So it's a lot about problem solving skill and trying to figure out what needs to bend in which way. Does it need to be a harsh bend? Can I get away with, simply assigning weight, or do I need to paint weight a little bit to get it to bend more in a certain way? Or can I get away with using automatic weight in a few segments for like a tube? And that usually works very well.